Under a sky heavy with gray snow clouds, the valley lay silent, as if the world itself had forgotten how to breathe. Each flake drifted slowly, soft as falling ash, covering fence posts, graves, and the roof of a lonely cabin crouched against the wind. Inside, a single lamp flickered, a thin, trembling heart in the cold. Evelyn Grace Carter stood beside it, trimming the wick with careful fingers. Her breath misted in the chill. The flame stretched, warm gold trembling against the pane of frost that sealed her from the world. For 3 winters she had lived alone on this ridge. The cabin was small, built by her father's hands, with walls that groaned under the weight of memory. She had tried to leave once, hitching her mare toward Silver Creek town, but the stairs had been colder than the snow. They called her strange, cursed, whispered that any man who lingered near her would meet the same fate as her kin. Her parents had died within weeks of each other, the fever taking her mother first, the grief her father after. Only she had remained, too stubborn to follow. Now she survived by rhythm. Chop wood, feed the fire, patch the same faded quilt her mother once stitched. Her voice, when she used it, came out like a secret. At night, she sometimes read aloud from her father's Bible, just to prove she still existed. "The Lord is my shepherd," she would murmur. "Though I walk through the valley," and she would pause there, listening to the wind answer. Outside, the world was bone-white. The line of pines behind the cabin stood like watchful sentinels, their branches heavy with ice. Beyond them ran a narrow trail down to the town where gossip grew thicker than snow. Evelyn had heard the whispers last she went for flour and candles. "That Carter woman's still up there," Mrs. Penwell had told the butcher. "Living alone with ghosts. She'll bring bad luck, mark my words." The man had nodded, uneasy, as though agreeing might keep him safe from whatever haunted her. She'd kept her chin high, but shame burned her throat. Even kindness felt cruel when mixed with pity, like the way Sheriff Briggs had offered to escort her home, calling her Miss Evelyn, with a voice too gentle to be real. He was a decent man, but his eyes held the same truth as the rest. She was something fragile best left untouched. She thanked him, refused the ride, and carried her bag through the snow alone. That had been 3 days ago. Now another storm was gathering, heavier, meaner. The wind carried a low whistle, and the trees bowed beneath its weight. Evelyn stepped outside to bring in more wood, her breath rising in pale curls. The sky above the ridge had gone the color of pewter. She loaded her arms until they ached, then paused at the sound of something distant, a hollow thud. A heartbeat that wasn't hers. She turned. At first there was nothing but snow swirling like smoke, the trees shifting. Then a shape moved among them, a tall shadow where no man should be. She froze, pulse loud in her ears. The figure staggered once, caught itself, and moved again, closer. It was a man, but enormous, built like the mountain itself. His dark hair hung wet against his shoulders, his chest bare despite the storm, skin bronzed even under the cold. In the gray light, she saw blood streaking his arm, black and frozen. He reached the fence, swayed, and went to one knee. Evelyn's first thought was fear. Apache, she realized. His people still roamed these parts, though most kept far from settlers. Her father used to say the wars had ended, but she had seen enough scars on men in town to know peace only changed its clothes. It never left. Still, the man before her wasn't holding a weapon. He was bleeding into the snow, breath ragged. She hesitated only a moment. The storm howled, snatching her breath. Then she dropped the wood and hurried forward, boots sinking deep. "Hey!" she shouted, though her voice cracked with cold. "Can you hear me?" His head lifted. His eyes, dark as wet stone, found hers. He tried to speak but only coughed, crimson staining the white ground. She knelt beside him, heart hammering, and pressed her hand to his shoulder. His skin was fever-hot, slick with half-frozen blood. "Don't move," she whispered. "You'll die out here." He looked at her a long moment, as if weighing her soul. Then his lips parted. "Why do you care?" The question struck her like a wind gust. Why did she? She didn't know, only that no living thing deserved to die in the cold. "Because someone once cared for me," she said softly. She helped him to his feet, half carrying his weight. He was enormous, his arm heavy around her shoulders, Yet she managed to drag him through the gate, across the porch, and inside the cabin. The door slammed behind them, cutting off the storm. Inside, the air thickened with heat and silence. She eased him onto a chair near the hearth. His breath came rough but steady. Closed now, she saw the wound. Clean through the shoulder, likely from a bullet. The edges were raw but not fresh. "You need this cleaned," she murmured. He didn't answer, only watched her with wary eyes. She fetched water and torn linen, her hands trembling slightly. He winced when she dabbed at the wound. "You're no doctor," he said through clenched teeth. "I'm the only one you've got," she replied. Her tone was firm but quiet. The firelight drew gold across her cheekbones, soft against her pale skin. After a while, his breathing slowed. He studied her calm, her care, the way she worked without asking who he was or what trouble followed him. "Name," he said at last, voice hoarse. "Yours." "Evelyn Carter." He nodded slowly. "Evelyn," he repeated, as if tasting the sound. Then his eyes closed. She sat back, exhausted. Outside, the wind screamed around the chimney. Snow rattled against the shutters like fingers trying to get in. She hadn't had another living soul in this cabin for years. Now, one sat bleeding by her fire, a stranger whose people she'd been taught to fear. She thought of the gossip, of what the town would say if they knew. But then she looked at his hand, rough and scarred, twitching faintly as if reaching for something in a dream, and she felt pity outweigh caution. Hours passed. The storm deepened. She brewed broth from dried herbs and poured it carefully between his lips. He stirred, muttering words she couldn't understand. Something in his language, soft and low. The syllables rolled like prayer. When night finally thickened, she sat near the fire, half asleep, listening to his breathing blend with the storm. For the first time in years, the cabin felt less empty. Her mind drifted back to the question he'd asked, why she cared, and to her own answer. "Someone once cared for me." She wondered if that still counted when the memory had almost faded. A sharp crack outside made her start. She peered through the frosted window. In the distance, beyond the pines, a dim glow pulsed, lanterns moving. Men on horseback. She knew their shape, their swagger, even through the storm. Riders from Silver Creek. Searching. She turned to the man by the fire. His eyes were open now, alert despite exhaustion. He had seen it too. "They're coming," she whispered. His gaze met hers, steady as stone. "For me," he said. She swallowed. "Then we'd better keep that fire low." He nodded once, and the faintest shadow of a smile touched his lips, something between gratitude and warning. The storm roared harder, the wind carrying faint shouts up the ridge. Evelyn's pulse raced, but she didn't move from the window. Behind her, the stranger's voice came quiet as the falling snow. "Evelyn Carter," he said, as if confirming a memory. "I've heard that name before." She turned sharply, startled. "How could you?" But he didn't answer. His eyes had closed again, breath slowing to the rhythm of the storm. Outside, hoofbeats echoed closer through the snow, and Evelyn felt the first true tremor of fear, and something else too, small but burning, like a spark waking inside her after years of silence. The storm did not end that night, it only learned to whisper. By morning, snow buried the fence up to the rails, and the wind had sculpted the land into soft, glimmering dunes. Inside the cabin, the world was dim and orange from the hearth's steady glow. Evelyn moved quietly, careful not to wake the man sleeping on her chair. His breathing came slow, heavy as the rhythm of waves she'd only ever read about. Steam rose from a pot she had set to boil. The scent of herbs, sage and pine, mingled with smoke. When he stirred, she turned. His eyes opened to slits, dark and watchful. For a moment, they looked at one another in silence. The kind of silence that measured distance between strangers and tried to bridge it. "You should eat," she said finally. He sat up with effort. "I owe you." "You owe me nothing," she replied, setting a bowl before him. "The weather would have killed you before morning." He ate slowly, every motion deliberate, as though rediscovering hunger. When the spoon clinked against the bowl, he spoke again. "You didn't have to take me in." Evelyn met his gaze. I didn't, she said softly, but I did. Outside, the wind sighed against the walls. Inside, another kind of storm gathered, the uneasy blend of gratitude and mistrust between two people long taught to fear one another. He asked for her name again, as if repeating it might make it real. Evelyn Carter. He nodded. Taza Redhawk, he said, his voice low, carrying the cadence of far plains. The name seemed too large for the cabin, like a drumbeat echoing against the wooden walls. They passed the hours in fragile quiet. Taza mended his gear, a torn strap, a worn knife sheath, while Evelyn swept and tended to her chores. She tried not to notice the way his muscles flexed when he moved, the faint sheen of sweat on his bronzed skin despite the cold. He, in turn, pretended not to see how she bit her lip when she worked, or how the light caught the curve of her throat when she leaned toward the fire. By midday, the storm returned, hammering the roof. Taza glanced toward the door. You live here alone? 3 winters now, she said. Since my family passed. Alone is a hard way. She gave a small, bitter laugh. Not harder than company that pities you. He studied her for a long moment but said nothing more. The logs cracked in the hearth, sparks leapt like fireflies. As dusk neared, she saw him shiver and fetched an old blanket. It's clean, she said. I have my own hide, he murmured. Humor me. He accepted it reluctantly, wrapping it across his shoulders. The sight of her father's blanket, the one she had sworn no other man would ever use, startled her. But something in Taza's expression softened her defenses. He did not look proud now, nor fierce. He looked human, tired. When night fell, she lit the lamp again. The flame carved their shadows across the cabin wall, 2 figures stitched together by light. He asked about the graves behind the cabin, his tone careful, respectful. My parents, she said. And my brother. The fever took them. He bowed his head slightly, a gesture of mourning from his people. The earth remembers, he said. She turned away to hide her trembling hands. No one in town had ever spoken of her loss without either judgment or pity. His words felt neither, they were simple, sacred. Hours passed. The storm raged louder, but inside the air thickened with warmth. Evelyn worked the spinning wheel while Taza sat near the door, sharpening his knife by instinct, not malice. She found comfort in the rhythm, the hum of wool, the scrape of stone. 2 sounds, steady as breath. At one point, she looked up. They'll come, she said quietly. Men from town. They saw your tracks before the snow covered them. He did not flinch. Let them. They won't understand, she pressed. They never do. I won't bring trouble on you, Evelyn Carter. Too late for that, she murmured. They already think I'm cursed. For the first time he smiled, a small, reluctant curve of the lips. Then maybe they'll blame me instead. She tried not to smile back but failed. It startled her, the way laughter felt like thawing. The moment passed quickly. Thunder rolled outside, deep and hollow. Later, when she thought he slept, she watched him through the low light. His face, carved by weather and time, seemed peaceful now. A scar traced his jaw, another his chest. Stories written in flesh. She wondered what kind of life left marks like that. Then she realized she was staring and turned away, heart racing like a guilty child's. She crawled into her bed behind the curtain partition. For a long while she couldn't sleep. The wind rattled the windows, the fire hissed, and every sound carried the echo of hoofbeats. She imagined the men from town, torches in hand, claiming they came to protect her. The same men who crossed the street when she passed. The same who whispered she'd lost her mind living alone in the hills. A crash outside snapped her upright. She pushed the curtain aside. Taza was gone. Panic sliced through her chest. She pulled on her shawl and stepped into the biting cold. Snow blinded her, thick and fast. Then she saw him, a tall shape near the fence, standing bare-chested in the blizzard, bow drawn, eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the pines. She ran to him, shouting over the wind. Are you mad? You'll freeze. Someone's out there, he said. She looked but saw nothing. Only swirling white, ghostly branches. There's no one, please come inside. He hesitated, then lowered the bow. When she touched his arm, his skin burned under her fingers. She could feel the tremor of his muscles, the stubbornness holding him upright. "You shouldn't care," he said again. "And yet I do." Her voice broke on the last word. They stood like that, breath mingling in the cold, until at last he let her guide him back. Inside, she pushed him toward the fire. "Sit. Before I regret saving you." He obeyed, a faint smirk on his lips. "You already do." She glared but fetched another blanket, wrapping it around his shoulders herself. Her hands brushed his neck. Heat flooded her cheeks. For a long moment they said nothing. Only the storm spoke, soft, persistent, circling the cabin like a living thing. Finally he murmured, "You have a brave heart, Evelyn Carter." She turned away, voice trembling. "No. Just a lonely one." He looked at her for a while, eyes reflecting the firelight like dark amber. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "they are the same thing." She didn't answer. Instead, she sat across from him, both of them silent as the world outside buried itself in snow. When she finally drifted to sleep by the hearth, she dreamed of running water and thunder, not of storms but of spring. She woke before dawn. The cabin glowed faintly blue with the first light. The fire had gone low, and the chair beside it was empty. Panic again. She rose, heart pounding, and stepped to the window. Outside, Taza stood facing the sunrise, his back to her, the snow glimmering around him. He looked almost carved from the mountain, strong, still, and yet alone. Then he turned and saw her watching. He didn't speak, only lifted one hand in silent acknowledgement, palm open as if to say, "I'm still here." And in that moment, something in her, something long frozen, began to move. When morning came, the storm had quieted into a soft, drifting hush, and the world outside the cabin glowed blue beneath a pale sun. The trees glittered under frost, each branch wearing glass. Evelyn woke to the scent of coffee, strong and bitter, and found Taza crouched near the stove, tending it with one arm bound. The wound had begun to heal, but his skin still looked raw where the bullet had passed. His movements were steady, almost reverent, as though he respected fire the way one respects an old god. She sat up, pulling her shawl around her shoulders. "You're using too much wood," she said softly. He looked over his shoulder. "Fire is the only thing that listens," he said. "And I don't like silence." She smiled faintly. "You get used to it. Or it eats you," he replied. He poured her a tin cup of coffee, dark as night. His hands were rough but careful when he passed it to her. They sat opposite each other at the small table, two survivors of different worlds sharing warmth. She studied him in the morning light. Without the fever, his face seemed younger, though still carved from something unyielding. There was wisdom in his silence, but loneliness too, the kind she recognized by instinct. "Why were they chasing you?" she asked finally. He sipped his drink before answering. "Because I wouldn't kill a man who deserved it." Her brow furrowed. "That sounds like mercy, not guilt." "Mercy is guilt to them," he said simply. The way he said them carried centuries inside it. Whites, soldiers, townsfolk, lawmen, anyone who had ever pointed a rifle at his people. She looked down at her hands, pale against the cup, and realized how small her world had been until he entered it. Later that day, she watched him patch the roof, bare-chested in the cold, his breath rising in clouds. He moved like a man built from storms, every action measured, purposeful. She handed him nails through the open window, scolding him for not resting. He only grinned faintly and said, "If I stay still, I remember." "What do you remember?" she asked. He hammered another board. "Too much." His answer lingered between them, carried by the wind. That evening, they shared stew by the fire. The light painted his face gold and her hair copper, and for the first time in years, laughter found its way into the cabin. It was quiet, uncertain at first, but real. She taught him small words from her Bible, bread, river, mercy, and he repeated them with slow care, his voice low and musical. Then he showed her how to say Atzadi, a word that meant the fire that doesn't die. She liked the sound of it. Outside, winter deepened. Wolves cried in the hills, but their voices no longer sounded like grief. They sounded like life, raw and honest. The two of them had found a rhythm. She mended, he hunted, they shared their silence as if it were language. But the world beyond the ridge had not forgotten them. One morning, Evelyn rode down to town for salt and thread. The streets of Silver Creek were half buried in snow. The saloon doors banged open as she passed, spilling laughter and suspicion. People stared. Mrs. Penwell stood by the store porch, her lips pinched. "Back from your mountain?" she asked loudly enough for everyone to hear. Evelyn ignored her, but the woman stepped closer. "They say you've got company up there. An Apache, they say. Half dead one day, whole enough the next. Funny, how your luck changes when a man shows up." A murmur rippled through the bystanders. Evelyn met her gaze squarely. "My luck didn't change," she said evenly. "My heart did." She paid for her goods and left, the eyes of the town burning into her back. Shame mixed with anger as she rode home, snow stinging her cheeks. When she reached the cabin, Taza was outside splitting wood, smoke rising behind him. He looked up, reading her face before she spoke. "They'll come," she said. "Soon." He nodded, not surprised. "Then we'll be ready." She wanted to protest, to say we shouldn't have to fight, but part of her already knew that the real battle wasn't with guns. It was with fear. That night, she found him sitting by the fire, carving something small from wood. "What are you making?" she asked. He didn't look up. "A ring." Her breath caught. "For who?" "For a promise," he said. "Not yet made." She watched his hands move with patience, each stroke careful. The soft scrape of the knife filled the room. When he finished, he set it on the table, a simple wooden band, smooth and unadorned. She reached out, touched it with trembling fingers. It was still warm from his palms. "Why give this to me?" she asked quietly. "I didn't say it was for you," he said, a faint teasing glint in his eyes. Her face flushed. "Then I'll keep it safe," she said, voice barely above a whisper. Outside, snow began again, slow and soundless. He looked at her then, long enough that her heart forgot to beat properly. "You make this place feel like something more than hiding," he said. "And you make it feel less like a grave," she answered. They said no more. Words were clumsy things for what had already begun to bloom. Days blurred into weeks. When the thaw finally came, the world turned glassy and wet, snow melting into muddy streams that carried bits of the old winter away. Taza helped her plant herbs near the porch. She caught herself smiling when he cursed softly as the soil froze his fingers. At night, they shared the same fire, and sometimes the same silence that comes when two hearts learn to speak without voices. But peace never lasts long in a land built from suspicion. Near dusk one evening, the rumble of hooves echoed from the valley. Evelyn looked out and saw 4 riders climbing the ridge, rifles on their backs. The leading figure wore a brown duster and a star on his chest. Sheriff Briggs. Taza saw them too. "They've come," he said simply. She felt the blood drain from her face. "He said he'd protect me." "He protects his law," Taza murmured, pulling on his coat. The riders dismounted near the porch. Briggs called out, voice firm but not cruel. "Miss Carter. I need a word." Evelyn stepped outside, the cold cutting through her like truth. "There's no need for guns," she said. "No trouble, ma'am," Briggs said. "We just need the man you're keeping." "He's no threat," she replied. Mrs. Penwell's husband, standing beside the sheriff, snorted. "Savages are always a threat." Taza appeared in the doorway then, tall and calm, his hands empty. The men stiffened. Evelyn moved instinctively, placing herself between him and their rifles. "He's under my roof," she said. "And no man harms someone under my roof." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Briggs sighed. "Evelyn, you know how this looks. You're alone up here. Folks talk." "Let them," she said. "Talk has never built a fire in the cold." The sheriff hesitated, then gestured for his men to lower their weapons. "You're making this hard," he said quietly. "Then maybe it's worth something," she answered. The men turned away one by one, muttering as they rode off into the falling dusk. Only Briggs lingered. "You're choosing a rough path, Evelyn," he said. "I've walked rougher alone," she whispered. When they were gone, the tension broke. Taza's breath came slow behind her. She turned and found him looking at her with an expression that needed no translation. Respect, gratitude, something deeper. "You stood for me," he said. "You'd have done the same," she replied. He nodded once. "For you, yes." That night, neither spoke much. The storm had ended, but something else had begun, a fire neither could name. It burned quiet, clean, patient, the kind that doesn't destroy but warms. Before she slept, Evelyn reached for the wooden ring still resting on the table. She slipped it onto her finger, and for the first time in years, the cabin didn't feel borrowed. It felt alive. Yet even as she drifted into dreams, she knew peace had its own price. In the dark beyond the mountains, a flicker of orange rose against the sky, firelight not born of hearths, but of torches. And somewhere below, men were whispering her name. The world woke to silence broken only by the slow crackle of thawing snow. Mist curled through the trees like smoke from a long-forgotten fire. Evelyn stepped out onto the porch, shawl clutched tight around her shoulders. The air was too still. Even the birds seemed to hold their breath. Far below, she saw faint dust rising, a shape moving against the horizon. Men again. Fewer this time, but moving with purpose. Her stomach turned cold. Inside, Taza sat by the hearth, sharpening his knife with methodical patience. The wooden ring he had carved for her glinted faintly, where it lay on the table beside him. When she entered, he looked up, reading her face before she spoke. "They're coming," she said quietly. "Not the sheriff, others." He nodded once, slipping the knife into its sheath. "Then it ends today." "It doesn't have to end," she said, voice trembling. "If you go now, they'll stop hunting. You can disappear before they reach the ridge." He rose, towering, his expression unreadable. "And leave you to them? They won't hurt me." He gave a faint, humorless smile. "You believe that?" Her silence answered for her. He reached for his coat and rifle, but she stepped between him and the door. The morning light spilled across her face, making her eyes look like thawed ice. "I won't let you die here," she said. He looked down at her, at the stubborn tilt of her chin, the way her hand trembled but did not move aside. "I died long ago, Evelyn Carter," he said softly. "But you," his voice broke. "You made me remember what living feels like." The words hung between them like breath in winter. She wanted to speak, to stop him, but he was already moving past her, stepping into the white glare of the snow. By noon, the riders were at the clearing. 6 men, rough-faced and armed, the kind who needed no law to justify blood. At their head was Mr. Penwell, the storekeeper's husband, eyes burning with self-righteous fury. "We warned you, Carter," he shouted. "You bring a savage here, you bring trouble." Evelyn stood on the porch, Taza just behind her. "He's done nothing to you," she called back. Penwell spat into the snow. "He killed my brother." "That's a lie," Taza said, stepping forward. His voice carried calm authority, but his hand rested on the rifle slung across his back. "Your brother killed children. I spared him when I should not have." A murmur rippled through the men. One lifted his gun. Evelyn's heart thundered. She moved instinctively, standing in front of Taza. "You'll have to shoot through me first," she said. For a long moment, no one breathed. The men hesitated, uncertain, anger giving way to confusion. Then Penwell snarled and fired. The shot cracked the sky apart. Evelyn flinched as the sound tore through her ears, but Taza had moved faster, pulling her down, taking the bullet in his shoulder. The force spun him halfway around. He fell hard, blood blooming across his coat. "Stop!" she screamed, rushing to his side. "Stop, please." The men froze. Her hands pressed against the wound, crimson staining her fingers. His eyes met hers, dark and clear even through pain. "You see," he murmured. "I told you, fire always listens." "Don't you dare," she whispered, tears streaking her face. Don't you leave me now." Above them, the riders shifted uneasily. The sheriff appeared then, breathless, riding hard from the trail. "Put the guns down!" he roared. "All of you!" He dismounted, taking in the scene. The smoke, the blood, the woman kneeling over the wounded man. His expression crumpled with something close to shame. "What have you done?" Penwell's hands shook. "He's a murderer. He's the only man who's shown decency in this valley," the sheriff said sharply. "Go home before you add another grave to the snow." The men hesitated, muttering, then turned one by one, anger cooling into cowardice. Their horses vanished into the gray mist, leaving only silence and the sound of Evelyn's sobs. She cradled Taz's head in her lap, her shawl pressed against his shoulder. The sheriff knelt beside her. "He'll live," he said, inspecting the wound. "The bullet went through clean." She nodded faintly, unable to speak. Her hands wouldn't stop trembling. By evening, the fire was burning again, and the storm began to melt into rain. Taza slept on the bed she had dragged near the hearth. His breath came steady now, shallow but certain. Evelyn sat beside him, washing the blood from her hands. The room smelled of smoke, iron, and wet pine. When he stirred, she reached for his hand. "You should have let me take the bullet," she whispered. He turned his head weakly toward her. "I could no more let that happen than stop the rain." Tears filled her eyes. "Why do you always speak like you're not coming back?" He smiled faintly. "Because every day feels like a gift I didn't earn." She pressed her forehead against his hand. "Then stay," she said. "Stay and learn to earn it with me." He opened his eyes fully then, the firelight catching in them like twin embers. "You'd have me?" "I already do," she whispered. Outside, thunder rolled softly through the mountains. The rain began to patter against the roof, washing the blood from the earth, filling the air with the scent of life returning. Later, when the sheriff left and the lamps were low, Evelyn sat at the table carving something new from the leftover wood. A second ring. Her fingers were clumsy, but determination steadied her hand. She placed it beside his on the table, two circles of promise, imperfect but whole. As dawn rose, Taza woke to find her asleep by the fire, head resting on folded arms. He stood carefully, shoulder bound tight, and looked down at her, the woman who had risked everything for him. He touched her hair gently, reverently. Then he slipped the ring she'd made onto his finger. When she stirred, she found him standing at the door, watching the rain turn to mist. "You're leaving?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "No," he said, voice deep and sure. "I'm home." She stepped closer, the space between them alive with everything unspoken. He cupped her face in his rough hands, the warmth of the fire behind them, the cool breath of dawn before them. For a long heartbeat they stood still, suspended between two winters, the one that brought him to her door, and the one that would never come again. Then he kissed her, slow and certain, sealing the quiet vow that had already lived between them. Outside, the rain eased into sunlight, the valley breathing again. The narrator's voice lingered in the air like smoke. "I saw them once, years after, walking the ridge where snow first fell. Folks still whispered about the Carter woman and her Apache. But the wind told a truer story, that some storms don't destroy, they carve shelter, and some fires don't burn, they teach the heart to live." And from the cabin where love began, a thin trail of smoke rose into the morning sky, like a prayer finally answered.